The press conference was supposed to be about trade. The White House had arranged it as part of a broader initiative to improve U.S.-Africa economic relations. Karoline Leavitt, serving as White House press secretary in Trump's second term, was moderating a carefully curated panel of American and African officials discussing partnership opportunities, investment frameworks, development assistance. Standard diplomatic theater. The guest list included several African leaders, among them Captain Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso. His presence was somewhat controversial. He'd publicly rejected American terms for partnership before, but the administration wanted to project inclusivity. Show that even critical voices had a seat at the table. The event was proceeding normally. Questions about tariffs, infrastructure investment, Chinese competition in Africa. Leavitt handled them with practiced ease, delivering talking points about American commitment to African prosperity and partnership based on shared values. Then a journalist asked a question that wasn't on the approved list. Ms. Leavitt, given this administration's focus on combating human trafficking, can you comment on the status of the Jeffrey Epstein client list? Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of trafficking minors to wealthy men. The public still doesn't know who those men were. Will this administration release those names? The room's energy shifted immediately. This wasn't supposed to come up. Leavitt's expression tightened slightly, but she recovered quickly with the practiced deflection of a skilled press secretary. Look, the Epstein case was a tragedy on multiple levels. A deeply flawed individual whose actions hurt many people. But that case has been thoroughly investigated. Epstein is dead. Maxwell is in prison. The legal process has run its course. This administration is focused on current threats, current trafficking networks we can actually disrupt, not relitigating closed cases from previous administrations. It was a textbook non-answer. Acknowledge the question. Express appropriate concern. Redirect to current priorities. Move on. But before the moderator could call on the next questioner, Traoré's hand went up. Leavitt hesitated. Protocol suggested moving to a planned question. But ignoring an African leader at an event specifically designed to show respect for African voices would look bad. She nodded. Yes, Captain Traoré. Traoré stood, his expression serious. Ms. Leavitt, you said the Epstein case was a tragedy involving a deeply flawed individual. With respect, I think you're mischaracterizing what happened. Jeffrey Epstein wasn't flawed. He was a child trafficker. He ran an organized criminal network that procured underage girls for wealthy and powerful men. That's not a flaw. That's a crime. Multiple crimes. Against children. The room went completely quiet. American officials looked uncomfortable. This was not the tone for diplomatic events. Leavitt tried to maintain her composure. Captain Traoré, I don't think anyone is minimizing the seriousness of his crimes, then why call him deeply flawed instead of what he was? Why describe systematic child trafficking as a tragedy instead of a crime? Tragedy suggests unfortunate circumstances. This was deliberate, organized, profitable. And it involved many people beyond Epstein himself. Leavitt's media training kicked in. I appreciate your passion on this issue. Human trafficking is indeed a serious crime that this administration takes very seriously, then answer the question that was asked. Where is the client list? Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted of trafficking minors to someone. The trial established she didn't traffic them to herself. She trafficked them to men. Wealthy men. Powerful men. Who were they? Why doesn't the American public know? Why doesn't the world know? Captain Traoré, I'm not going to comment on ongoing legal matters, the trial is over. Maxwell was convicted 2 years ago. What legal matter prevents releasing the names of the men who paid to rape children? The bluntness was shocking in a diplomatic setting. American officials shifted uncomfortably. But Traoré wasn't finished. I've read about this case. The trial transcripts are public. There are references to Client 1, Client 2, names redacted. We know from testimony that these men included politicians, businessmen, academics, celebrities. We know some of their names from other sources. Prince Andrew was publicly identified. Bill Clinton flew on Epstein's plane dozens of times. Donald Trump was photographed with Epstein repeatedly and made comments about Epstein liking women, on the younger side. But the official list of everyone involved has never been released. Why? Leavitt's professional mask was cracking. Captain, those are serious allegations, they're not allegations. They're documented facts. The question is why your government, which claims to oppose human trafficking, protects the identities of men who participated in it. Because that's what sealing that list does. It protects them. A State Department official tried to intervene. Perhaps we should return to the topic of today's discussion. No, Traoré's voice was calm but firm. This is the topic. Because it reveals everything about how your system actually works. Poor people who traffic children go to prison. We see their names. Their faces. Their trials are public. But wealthy people who buy trafficked children? Their names are sealed. Their privacy is protected. Their reputations are preserved. And we're told this is for legal reasons, or privacy reasons, or because the case is closed. But what it actually is a cover-up. Leavitt tried to regain control. That's a very serious accusation, it's an observation. Epstein trafficked girls to wealthy men for decades. He did this openly enough that it was rumored about in elite circles. People knew. Some participated. Some looked the way. Some made jokes about it. And when he was finally caught, he was given an absurdly lenient plea deal in 2008. 13 months in a facility where he was allowed to leave for work most days. For trafficking dozens of minors. Who arranged that deal? Alexander Acosta, who later became Trump's labor secretary until the Epstein scandal forced him to resign. Why was Epstein given special treatment? Because he had information on powerful people. Because releasing that information would damage people the system protects. The press conference had completely derailed. Journalists were furiously taking notes. This was not the story they'd expected to cover. Traoré continued, and when Epstein was arrested again in 2019, when it looked like he might finally face real justice, he died in a federal facility under circumstances that even the Attorney General called suspicious. Cameras malfunctioned. Guards fell asleep. A man facing life in prison for crimes involving the world's elite somehow hanged himself despite being on suicide watch. And we're supposed to believe this was incompetence, not convenience. Captain Traoré, Leavitt tried again. I'm not finished. Because here's what bothers me most, Ghislaine Maxwell was convicted. The trial proved she trafficked minors to men for sexual abuse. But she was convicted of trafficking to unnamed persons. The judge sealed the client list. The FBI has it. Your government has it. But the public doesn't. The victims know who abused them, they testified about it. But the rest of us aren't allowed to know. Why? What legal principle protects the privacy of men who paid to rape children? Because I can't think of one. Can you? Leavitt looked trapped. Any answer would be problematic. Defending privacy rights of Epstein's clients would look like defending child rapists. Admitting the list should be released would contradict administration policy and anger powerful people. She went with deflection. Captain, I understand you have strong feelings about this, but it's not appropriate for me to comment on specific legal decisions made by courts. It's not a legal decision. It's a political one. Courts don't seal information to protect criminals. They seal it when powerful interests demand protection. Everyone knows this. Everyone knows there are names on that list that would destroy careers, end political dynasties, expose the rot at the center of American and global elite culture. And everyone knows that's why it stays sealed. Not for legal reasons. For political ones. A CNN reporter jumped in with a follow-up. Ms. Leavitt, Captain Traoré has raised a legitimate question. If the administration is serious about fighting human trafficking, why not release the Epstein client list as a matter of public interest? What's the harm in naming men who were clients of a convicted child trafficker? Leavitt was visibly flustered now. I would need to consult with the Justice Department about what information can be released. That's not an answer, Traoré said. That's a delay. You'll consult, they'll say it's under review, months will pass, and nothing will happen. That's how this works. That's how it's worked for years. Since 2019, people have been asking for this list. It never comes. Because the people on it are too powerful to expose. Another journalist, Captain Traoré, you seem very informed about this case. Why is an African leader so focused on an American scandal? Traoré looked at them directly. Because this isn't just an American scandal. Epstein's network was international. His island had visitors from around the world. His operation lasted decades because powerful people in multiple countries benefited from it and protected it. And because the way America handles this case sets a precedent. If the most powerful country in the world can't hold its elite accountable for child trafficking, what hope do the rest of us have? In Africa, we're lectured constantly about corruption, about rule of law, about accountability. American officials come to our countries and tell us we need to prosecute corruption, even when it involves powerful people. And they're right. We should. But then I see how America handles Epstein. I see a child trafficking network that operated for decades involving some of the most powerful people in your country. I see one person dead under suspicious circumstances. One person in prison. And everyone else protected. Their names sealed. Their privacy preserved. Their lives continue as if they never paid to rape children. And I'm supposed to take lectures about accountability seriously? The room was electric. This had gone so far beyond the planned discussion that there was no recovering it. Leavitt made one more attempt. Captain, I think we need to be careful about making accusations without evidence. I'm not making accusations. I'm asking questions. Questions that should be asked. That American journalists should be asking every day until they're answered. Where is the client list? Why is it sealed? Who made that decision? Who benefits from it staying sealed? These aren't complicated questions. They have simple answers. The list exists. Powerful people are on it. Releasing it would damage those people. Therefore it stays sealed. That's the answer. The only question is whether your government has the integrity to admit it. Traoré sat down. The press conference dissolved into chaos. Reporters shouting questions. Officials conferring. Leavitt trying to restore order but clearly shaken. The event was supposed to strengthen US-Africa relations. Instead, it had become an international incident. An African leader had stood in a US government building and called out what millions of people believed but few in positions of power would say, that the Epstein case represented a fundamental failure of accountability. That the justice system had two tiers. That the powerful were protected even when their crimes involved children. Within hours, the video was everywhere. Traoré's questions. Leavitt's inability to answer. The clear discomfort of American officials. It was shared millions of times. Not just by conspiracy theorists, but by mainstream observers who'd been frustrated by the same questions for years. Why hadn't the client list been released? Who was being protected? The White House went into damage control. Leavitt's office released a statement. Captain Traoré's comments today were inappropriate for a diplomatic event and contained unfounded conspiracy theories about the Epstein case. All legal processes were followed appropriately, and the administration won't be bullied into relitigating closed cases based on internet rumors. But the statement backfired. Because Traoré hadn't cited internet rumors. He'd cited court documents. Trial transcripts. Public reporting by mainstream outlets. The prints. The presidents. The sealed list. These weren't conspiracies. They were documented facts that the media had reported but never pressured officials about the way Traoré just had. The fallout from the press conference was immediate and divided sharply along predictable lines. Conservative media attacked Traoré as reckless and anti-American. African leader spreads Epstein conspiracy theories at White House event. Foreign official disrespects American institutions with baseless accusations. The focus wasn't on whether his questions were legitimate, but on his audacity to ask them. Fox News ran segments suggesting Traoré was trying to distract from his own country's problems by attacking America. That he was repeating internet conspiracy theories. That his comments were inappropriate for a diplomatic setting. But something unexpected happened. The segments didn't land the way they usually did. Because every time they showed the clip of Traoré asking, "Where is the client list?" comment sections exploded with people saying they wanted to know the same thing. Conservative viewers who normally trusted Fox found themselves agreeing with the African captain they were supposed to dismiss. Liberal media was conflicted. On one hand, Traoré had embarrassed a Trump administration official, which they enjoyed. On the other hand, the Epstein scandal implicated people across the political spectrum. Bill Clinton's dozens of flights on Epstein's plane. The sealed client list that presumably contained names from both parties. Powerful people in media, academia, business, many with liberal politics. So their coverage was cautious. African leader raises questions about Epstein case transparency. They reported what Traoré said without fully endorsing it, but also without the outright dismissal conservative media attempted. But the real reaction came from ordinary people across the political spectrum. Within 48 hours, #release the client list was trending globally. Not driven by conspiracy theorists, but by people who'd heard Traoré ask questions they'd been thinking for years. Mothers. Fathers. Survivors of abuse. People who'd watched the Epstein case with growing frustration at how the justice system protected the powerful. The hashtag wasn't partisan. Conservatives used it alongside progressives. Because whatever else divided them, most people could agree that men who paid to rape children should be exposed, not protected. Victims' advocates seized the moment. Organizations that had been pushing for transparency in the Epstein case for years suddenly had a platform. They released statements supporting Traoré's questions. Captain Traoré asked what we've been asking since Ghislaine Maxwell's conviction: who were the men she trafficked children to? The victims know. The FBI knows. The court knows. Why doesn't the public know? One particularly powerful statement came from Virginia Giuffre, one of Epstein's most prominent victims. An African leader showed more concern for Epstein's victims today than the American government has shown in years. He asked the right questions. He centered the victims, not the criminals being protected. And he refused to accept non-answers. That's what accountability looks like. I wish American officials had a fraction of his courage. The statement went viral. Because it came from a victim. Someone with moral authority on the subject that no government official could match. The White House tried to contain the damage. Press briefings for the next week were dominated by questions about the client list. Leavitt and other officials gave variations of the same answer: the Justice Department handles such matters. We can't comment on ongoing investigations or sealed court documents. The administration is focused on current trafficking cases, not historical ones. But the answers satisfied no one. Because Traoré had already dismantled them. The case wasn't ongoing, Maxwell had been convicted and sentenced. The documents weren't sealed for legal reasons but by judicial decision that could be reversed. And treating systematic child trafficking by elite networks as historical, rather than demanding full accountability, sent a clear message about priorities. 3 weeks after the press conference, a congressional hearing was scheduled. The House Oversight Committee, under pressure from constituents demanding answers, called a session on transparency in high-profile criminal cases. They invited Traoré to testify. It was unprecedented, a foreign leader testifying before Congress about American justice system failures. But the optics of refusing would be worse than allowing it. Traoré accepted. When he appeared before the committee, the room was packed. Journalists, advocates, survivors. People who'd waited years for someone in a position to demand answers to actually do it. The committee chair, a Republican from Texas, opened, "Captain Traoré, you've created quite a controversy with your questions about the Epstein case. Some say you're interfering in American domestic matters. How do you respond?" "Congressman, child trafficking is not a domestic matter. It's a human rights issue." When an international trafficking network operated for decades, with clients from multiple countries, with victims from multiple countries, it's everyone's business. Especially when justice is denied. You've accused the American government of protecting Epstein's clients. That's a serious charge. I haven't accused. I've asked questions. Questions you should be asking. Where is the client list? Why is it sealed? Who made that decision? Who benefits from it remaining sealed? If you have answers, I'd be grateful to hear them. The congressman didn't have answers. He tried pivoting to procedure, to jurisdictional issues, to complexities of the legal system. But Traoré cut through each deflection with the same relentless focus. These aren't complex questions. They're simple. Either the list exists or it doesn't. Either powerful people are on it or they're not. Either transparency serves justice or protects criminals. Which is it? A Democratic congresswoman from California took a different approach. "Captain Traoré, I appreciate your advocacy for victims. But some argue that releasing names could violate privacy rights or due process. How do you respond?" "Congresswoman, whose privacy rights are we protecting? Men accused by multiple victims, under oath, of paying to sexually abuse children? What due process are they owed that the victims weren't given? The girls Epstein trafficked didn't get privacy. Their trauma was exposed in court. Their testimonies were public. They had to relive abuse in detail so Maxwell could be convicted. But the men who abused them get privacy? That's not due process. That's a system designed to protect power." But without formal charges against these individuals, Maxwell was convicted of trafficking to them. The crime was proven. The only question is the identity of the criminals she trafficked to. If I run a drug distribution network, and I'm convicted of selling drugs, the people I sold to are drug buyers. They committed crimes. They don't get privacy just because they weren't individually prosecuted. The same principle applies here. Maxwell trafficked children. The people she trafficked them to committed rape. They're criminals. Name them. The exchange was devastating. Because Traoré's logic was unassailable. The only argument against releasing the list was that it would harm powerful people. But harming powerful people who committed crimes is what justice systems are supposed to do. A Republican congressman from Florida, clearly frustrated, went on the attack. "Captain, you're from Burkina Faso. Your country has serious problems: poverty, terrorism, instability. Why are you so focused on American issues instead of fixing your own country?" Traoré's response was calm but cutting. "Congressman, I can focus on multiple things. But since you raised it, my country's problems are often blamed on corruption, on powerful people escaping accountability. American officials lecture us about rule of law. About how everyone must face justice regardless of position. Those are good principles. I agree with them. I'm simply asking America to apply them consistently. If you can't hold your own elite accountable for trafficking children, you have no moral authority to lecture anyone about corruption." The congressman had no response. The hearing continued for 3 hours. Every member tried different angles. Some supportive of transparency. Some defensive of American institutions. But none could satisfactorily answer Traoré's core questions. Because the answers were either embarrassing or damning. Yes, the list exists. Yes, powerful people are on it. Yes, it's sealed to protect them. Saying that out loud was impossible. So they deflected, obfuscated, and ran out the clock. But the hearing accomplished something important. It forced the issue into official congressional record. Traoré's questions. The non-answers. The clear discomfort of officials who couldn't defend the indefensible. All documented. All public. Outside the hearing, survivors held a press conference. Virginia Giuffre stood with other Epstein victims, praising Traoré. He did what American politicians won't do. He asked the questions that matter. He centered victims instead of protecting criminals. And he refused to accept the excuses we've been given for years. We're grateful to him. And we're ashamed that it took someone from outside America to demand the accountability our own government won't provide. The moment was powerful. Victims thanking a foreign leader for advocacy their own officials wouldn't offer. The contrast was damning. 6 months after the initial press conference, the pressure had grown to the point that a federal judge agreed to review the sealing of certain Epstein-related documents. Not the full client list, not yet, but a step. The judge noted in his decision that public interest in transparency regarding human trafficking networks may outweigh privacy interests of individuals credibly accused of participating in such networks. It wasn't a full victory. But it was movement. Movement that hadn't happened in years of advocacy by survivors and journalists. Movement that came only after Traoré forced the issue into the international spotlight. The White House maintained its position that the administration wouldn't comment on judicial proceedings. But privately, officials were furious. Traoré had done something they'd thought impossible, made Epstein a bipartisan issue that demanded answers rather than a partisan weapon to be deployed selectively. A year after the press conference, Traoré was asked in an interview why he'd focused so much attention on the Epstein case. Because it reveals how systems of power actually work. Not how they claim to work, but how they actually function. In theory, justice is blind. In practice, justice protects the powerful. Epstein's case proves this. A child trafficking network operated for decades. Dozens of wealthy men participated. One person is dead. One is in prison. Everyone else walks free. Their names are sealed. Their reputations intact. Their lives continue. That's not justice. That's a system functioning exactly as designed, to protect power. But you're not American. Why does American injustice concern you? Because American power is global. When America fails to hold its elite accountable, it sends a message to elites everywhere: you can get away with anything if you're powerful enough, connected enough, wealthy enough. That message affects every country. Every system. It tells corrupt officials everywhere that accountability is for the powerless, not the powerful. So yes, it concerns me. It should concern everyone who believes in justice. Do you think the client list will ever be released? I don't know. But I know this: every day it stays sealed is another day the system chooses to protect child rapists over their victims. Every day officials refuse to answer basic questions about it is another day they reveal their priorities. And every day survivors have to live knowing their abusers are protected by the same government that claims to fight trafficking. That's obscene. And I'll keep saying it's obscene until something changes. The interviewer pressed, "You've been criticized for making this personal. For attacking American officials." I haven't attacked anyone. I've asked questions. If those questions feel like attacks, perhaps that says something about the defensibility of the positions being questioned. I don't think asking, "Where is the client list?" is an attack. I think refusing to answer is. What would you say to people who claim you're spreading conspiracy theories? I'd ask them to specify which theory. That Epstein ran a trafficking network? That's proven in court. That he had wealthy clients? That's proven in court. That Ghislaine Maxwell trafficked children to someone? That's what she was convicted of. That there's a list of clients? The trial referenced it. That it's sealed? That's publicly documented. Which part is conspiracy? The only theory is that all of this is somehow above board, that sealing the names is normal and justified. That's the conspiracy theory, the idea that this is all proper legal procedure rather than a cover-up. The interview went viral. Because again, Traoré had made the logic undeniable. Nothing he said was conspiracy. It was all documented fact. The conspiracy was pretending this was normal. Years later, the Epstein client list remained sealed. The powerful remained protected. But something had changed. The questions could no longer be dismissed as conspiracy theories or fringe obsessions. Traoré had forced them into mainstream discourse. Had made officials defend the indefensible in public. Had centered victims in a conversation that had too often focused on the powerful. Survivors often said Traoré had done more for accountability with one press conference than years of official investigations. Because he'd asked the questions everyone else was too afraid, too compromised, or too complicit to ask. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change a conversation. Not solutions. Not answers. Just someone willing to ask the questions that power desperately wants to avoid.